dream come true. So I know many of you, most of you have been involved in even the earlier iteration of Code for GovTech last year in whatever capacity, right? Either as a mentor, as a contributor, as site advisors, as community builders. And so really a very warm welcome to all of you to this edition of Code for GovTech and building this together. So my name is Rahul Kulkarni. I'm a chief technologist at Samagra, work with a bunch of open source projects, DPGs, with all of you. And thanks to all of you, I think there's a lot of magic happening across India over the last decade, and I'm sure it's going to continue over the next many years. What I also have, today presenting with me, who I have is Supreet Sekon, is a vice president at Samagra, also leads a lot of the digital public goods efforts that we've been involved in, and we've been working together with many of these folks. So all of you are really partners who've come together. We all build these things together. So I think it's time to take whatever we do to the community in some ways or the other. The other piece is other person also going to be presenting today is Karan. Karan is an engineering manager at Samagra. Karan moved from GovTech a couple of years ago to join Samagra recently, and he leads a lot of the engineering efforts at the company. So it's nice to see people jumping over from the other side into the impact sector. And I'm sure most of you have that story. So it's really nice to see all of that coming together. So with that, let me just dive in. What I want to give is little quick context. The whole goal of today's call is to get all of us together more as a group, as you all know from Code for GovTech last year as well. Samagra, we're facilitating this effort of getting the digital public good community going together. We all meet in different forms, in different contexts, in different projects, and collaborate in a very wonderful way across the board. But here is a chance that we want to get the entire community to actually participate, giving the entire community a flavor of how this is done, what is being done, and also mentor that community to be able to actually ramp up on what it means to create population scale projects. So with that, let me just dive in. I want to give you a little high level perspective, an abstracted view about Code for GovTech. Why was it created, and the value propositions for DPG builders and adopters. And then we'll get into super mentors, a little new thing that we're introducing this year, and get into what does it mean to actually define projects that you can actually get created part of this overall program. So with that, let's get into, need for this, or where is this coming from? So overall, you see, over the last decade, magic has happened where we started with, you never imagined your 10th grade mark sheet or 12th grade mark sheet would be available digitally on DigiLocker. You need not actually submit things in paper. They can just be digitally submitted. You never would have imagined going to an airport without a printout, let alone without, just with your face. With DigiYatra, you're just walking into the airport and, that gates opening, welcoming you by name. You also have, you actually transferring 2 rupees instead of taking that toffee or that little chocolate. You're actually transferring 2 rupees to that. You're getting 2 rupees from the shop vendor. You're transferring 10 rupees for that one banana that you may have gotten. And suddenly you realize that the whole world around you, around us, has turned digital, and magic has happened over the last 10 years. Right from Aadhaar, UPI, to a whole bunch of these digital public goods that have created and taken India by storm, and also the world by storm. So if you think of the world, Digital Public Goods Alliance is a term created by the United Nations to figure out what are open source projects for social good that actually help formulate and help create, value for sustainable development goals, whether it's in education, employment, sanitation, climate change, and so on. Now, the United Nations themselves has adopted open source as a strategy. And so a lot of projects in the United Nations, think of a peacekeeping force software, or figuring out how does Red Cross manage the ambulances. You need to figure out how all of these can be built by a community in open source, as opposed to being proprietary with one vendor, or then proprietary in terms of not really being open in terms of contribution or adoption. Second, G20, all of us know, India is now leader in the G20 summit this year. And what that also means is India has created a whole bunch of these, the group, G20 group is meeting in various forums. And I'm sure in variety of forums, right from, climate change, environment to others. But also what is happening is there's something called T20. So there's a technology 20, and there's a focused effort on figuring out what does it mean to get technology in sync. Why do you need to actually have a different foreign exchange to be taken out when you go to a different country? Can you not just use some standard? It could be UPI. Just like when we use vaccines, we could go from one country to another and the same vaccine, the same QR code kind of held together. Also, the India stack has been the foundation for a lot of these things. So iSpirit Group has been driving a lot of that in terms of thought process behind India stack. And India stack has been the building block for all of these DPGs that have been gotten created and gotten adopted. And so across the board, you see the journey of DPGs has seen a lot of success. We saw the DPGs built not just in India, but also being used across the world. So multiple countries use the same DIVOC, digital public good, to actually generate vaccination certificates, to give certificates across their countries in India and abroad. Then you have Sunbird, which is anchored by the Eight-Step Foundation. Now, there are about 3 crore hits every day on the site, and especially in COVID. And there are about 200 million kids who have access to it, at least 10 million teachers using it on a regular basis. I don't know how many of you have seen your kids' textbooks. You have QR codes on them, and most of these QR codes go to places like Sunbird, where free community licensed content is available for students, for teachers, right from assessments to videos to PDFs and so on. Then you have, there are versions of what we have in India, like Aadhaar. There is a counterpart called MOSIP, which is the open source version of Aadhaar, which anyone can take. So any country, you take Sri Lanka, you take Philippines, and different countries, about 7 countries are adopting not just Aadhaar, but technologies around it to figure out what does e-signet mean in terms of having a Meri Pehchan equivalent. What does e-locker mean in terms of having a DigiLocker equivalent in other countries? So there are open source projects that are counterparts for all of this. So in that sense, there has always been these things happening around us. Some of things are happening so fast that almost it is difficult for each one of us to also catch up on all of these. But since we are part of that ecosystem, often we have a good sense of what's happening, or we at least have heard of these things. But you talk to neighbors, you talk to families, you talk to colleges, suddenly you realize that the world outside really doesn't know anything about this. They're all willing to participate, wanting to figure out, hey, how do I contribute to it? And of course, this is not to limit the brave hearts who actually do that. So for example, Bharat, who's very much an open source contributor, part of MUI now, earlier part of Samagra. So he saw his birth date, his age on the vaccine certificate was wrong. Guess what he did? He just went to the code, he dug up from GitHub, where is the DIVOC code? He actually made that change, and that code change got approved within a day. Within a couple of days, it was actually part of the live vaccine certificate code, and the age bug was fixed. And so where there's a will, there is a way. But I think a large part of the ecosystem needs some guidance in terms of how do you actually get into thinking about digital public goods. So when you're a startup, when you're doing simple things, you're always thinking small products. So think of a Node.js module that does a rate limiting. So you see rate limiting, you know how to run it. It runs on your laptop. You can pull it together and things happen. But when it comes to digital public goods, it's complex. It is population scale. There is a massive backend, massive DevOps understanding to make that happen. There is also a very complex digital element of how do you actually make this accessible to an entire population? How do you get it accessible for someone who does not have a computer, does not have a phone, and so on? So a whole digital mode, assisted mode become functionality that are slightly different than what typically happens in regular small open source projects. And that's why we need something that actually helps people get mentored to be able to contribute to digital public goods, to kind of experience this wonderful thing that we have all been living for the last many, many years. And so Code for GovTech was formulated as India's first annual dedicated mentoring and coding program to create this community that can build and contribute to not just Indian public goods, but global digital public goods. And this is an experiential learning opportunity, right? So the way this has been designed is, what typically hackathons and other things do is, there is a problem statement, 10 people are competing for that problem statement. So you have the same thing created 10 times, and then the best one wins. And so contributions of each of them, sometimes it's a wonderful learning, but if you don't have the guidance, you may not get the output in line with what your capability exists. And that's why mentoring programs like these, and there are multiple mentoring programs very successful that we have taken learnings from. So for example, Code for GovTech, Google Summer of Code, one of the most popular ones. There are multiple such programs such as Linux Foundation Fellowship. There are others that also allow for mentoring opportunities for people to actually get into Linux. So it's very hard to actually just start off and say, oh, I'm going to contribute to Red Hat, I'm going to contribute to a Linux kernel code, until you actually have some mentor helping you. And so that's why Code for GovTech was created as a program where it allows for DPG builders and adopters on one side and contributors on the other side to come together in an experiential learning opportunity to actually go through a journey together, transferring knowledge, getting people ramped up and so on. So from a digital public good builder perspective, the value is that you actually have people who are now going to actually bring in more perspective into what you're doing, point out things that are wrong, make it easy to run on the laptop. When you're building it, you say, oh, it's working for me. But the moment you give it to someone else, they're like, look, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't deploy in this thing. I'm trying to deploy it on AWS. It's not working. That's when things start happening. So you need multiple people who are familiar with it to actually help out adoption. And on the adoption side, people who want to adopt this, you need not necessarily want to add a feature to it, but you want to adopt it for your organization. So for example, let's say your college, and you say, hey, the world is doing digital certificates. My college is still distributing paper certificates. What does it mean to take that vaccine code, DIVOC code, and actually make it work for myself, in my college to generate digitally signed certificates? So that is something as an adopter. So you may be an adopter organization that just wants to use this in your context, in your applications, or you may be a DPG builder and you're looking for actually more features to be created, things that you may not have thought of, or things that you have thought of, but always are bandwidth crunch on trying to figure out who can actually help with it. And so that's kind of the value for both of these sides of the story in terms of builders and adopters and community contributors. Then last year, we had actually done this as a 2 to 3 month program, a dedicated mentoring program, where there's a process, there is a process that you follow. There is RFCs that are generated, proposals are gotten, then you select someone, and we'll talk a little bit about that process. But also what was done was, then you have the whole mentoring process through a 2-month period, where you actually have a project created jointly between the mentoring organization, mentoring the contributor. In addition to that, this year, what you're planning is a continuous community building program as well. So what does a continuous community program do is enables a whole bunch of these problem statements to be continuously sent to this community. One of the learnings from last year was we saw huge excitement and interest in actually participating. And we said, oh, the people who didn't actually get selected part of the dedicated mentoring program. And the difference really is the dedicated mentoring program has a time-bound thing. So the projects are time-bound there. Also, there is a stipend associated with it. All the contributors actually get a stipend. Now, that's one side of the story. But on the other side, people are saying like, hey, I want to actually contribute to this. It's helping building the nation. It's building Bharat. How do I participate? And so they're not really as worried about the stipend. They're like, hey, I just want to write good code. I want to learn good stuff. And that's where the continuous community building program comes in, much beyond the dedicated mentoring program. So now on, I hope we are all going to envision this as a year-long activity. Of course, kicking it off with the dedicated mentoring program right now. Now, from last year, they were to give you some highlights, right? Just to give you a feel for who participates, how does this happen, and so on. So for about 9 DPG projects, there were about 13 selected contributors. They were contributing. So for these 9 projects, there were about 13 problem statements, 13 selected contributors. To arrive at the 13 contributors, there were 346 applications. These were proposals received. About 600 to 800 students actually applied for the whole thing. But out of that, we had to only select 13. And that broke our hearts, when you're doing that. And many of you were part of that, you really realize, oh, these are such talented people. How do we ensure that everyone continues in the community program? So that's what we're doing today or this time. But in addition, these 13, so what we're doing this time is these 13 then spend over, time over this thing, put in about 25 features. So not just what they committed to earlier, many of them went above and beyond and started having ideas and created more than what they thought. While I hate the whole, number of lines of code to actually, decide quality, but in some sense, because these are open source projects, you don't get merged. Your project doesn't get merged into the main branch unless you have good quality code. And so in that sense, there were 1 lakh lines of code that were written, which just to point to the quantum of contribution that actually came in through. Now, what is going to be different, what we're enhancing this time is about 10xing the number of contributors that we're trying to reach. So this time we're trying to do 100 projects and 100 contributors that would get stipends part of this program. Then the second is, as I mentioned, the dedicated mentoring program will be followed by a continuous community building program. So you can continue to give problem statements to the current folks who are part of the program, but also the folks who did not get selected part of the dedicated program. But of course, there's the continuous program that they can always be part of. And most importantly, what we also realize is many people in the industry, they are in the impact sector, they're in the capitalist sector, right? And they say, hey, I want to taste the impact sector. I want to contribute to what is happening across the nation. How do I do that? And so that's where we're, in addition to college students, we're involving working professionals as well as contributors. This is the first time we're trying it out. And hopefully it should go pretty well because we'll have experience coming in, perspectives coming in from different quarters. In terms of timelines, this is where we are looking at the overall. We are at we are in April right now. And so right now we're in a phase where projects are being nominated by organizations like yourself. Mentors are being nominated, part of that proposals. And then we'd actually have a project finalization between 1st and 10th of May. There'll be a public announcement of the finalized projects on 10th of May. After that, between 11th May and 28th May, till the end of May, we'll solicit contributor applications. And contributor applications are not just, hey, I want to apply, raise your hand, get your name and address. It is more about actually having them do proposals. In fact, we've already opened the floodgates. The Discord community is open for contributors. And you'd be surprised how many such enthusiastic contributors are already fixing first issues. They're taking up simple issues, actually fixing it, contributing right as we speak. So the community program is already kicked off in some ways. Then there is the final cohort selection. So what would be that cohort of contributors that get selected? There'd be an inauguration event mid-June around 21st. Then there'll be a DPG bootcamp and cohort bonding. What we realize is there needs to be a bootcamp to actually ramp them up on the DPG that is being that they are expected to work on. So a dedicated 1 week of DPG bootcamp would be done between 24th and 29th. And then 1st of July to 30th August, these 2 months would be the actual coding period. So this would be hardcore coding, working back and forth with a mentor, weekly touch points and so on. In middle of this, right, 28th July, there'll be a midpoint event and 30th August, a final event. And then we would, of course, do a postmortem, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and we'll all regroup as a group. And of course, continue the community program after that. So with that, I want to kind of pass on the baton to Supreet. And Supreet has led the program last year as well and is going to lead the program this year as well. Supreet has been involved in a whole bunch of DPGs that we've all been part of, right from very much part of Sunbird, working on Niramya in UP, on the health regulator piece, and amongst many others. And so who better than Supreet to give us a little more perspective into going to the next level of detail. What does it mean as a DPG builder adopter? What are your responsibilities? What does it actually mean to take this through? And then we'll have Karan give you examples of what are the projects that would be appropriate here. Because as builders and adopters, the questions that we're getting from you are, hey, what kind of project would work well here? So that's what we hope to get you through this call today. Over to you, Sukhpreet.
Sure. Thanks, Rahul. So what I'll do right now is I'll just spend a few minutes and overall just for everybody, we're just going to spend a few more minutes to cover this so that we want to open up for questions and see, if there are any clarifications or any questions regard to, how do we put projects and all that we want to discuss more. So I'll be brief. So as we start, I want to call out that I think one of the learnings we've all had is when it comes to contributions, typically because we're building DPGs, because we have our own, teams contributing towards it, typically what happens is our ability to attract other DPG builder contributors has always been a challenge. So one of the things which we want to do and want to ensure that we do is to give prospective contributors a good experience of working with the DPG. So what that looks like is that, we put down well documented or a very clear tickets on GitHub for these issues. And we have mentors who are able to spend about 60 to 80 hours, Venkatesh screen, yeah, who are able to spend about 60 to 80 hours over a period of 5 months. And that's something that we had shared also as part of the email, and I'll come through, I'll share this further as well. But the idea is to have somebody guide prospective contributors. We'll have proposals that will come for your project. So when you put out your problem statements, you'll get proposals for your problem statement. So the objective would be that the mentors can evaluate those proposals and identify whoever is the best contributor that you want to go forward with for this engagement. This experience is meant to be the idea is to have a seamless mentoring and learning experience for that contributor. So last year, the experience was really good. So when we took feedback from all the different mentees, the experience that they received was really high. So we want to continue maintaining a certain benchmark of this in the community. Want to ensure there is good communication between the different contributors and your teams. And in case there is any issue with any mentor or somebody has a personal emergency, there is timely replacement so that the contributor's journey doesn't get impacted. So these are some core responsibilities that we're looking for DPG builders and adopters as you become part of this program. Now moving forward, the point that I wanted to share is, if you were to look at this, what you would be expecting to do is that as a mentor in this program, you'd be spending about 56 to 80 hours spread across from April to July, August, across 5 months, but in different time periods. So the idea is that in April right now, you'll just be defining the problem statements that you have and then updating those issues on your GitHub repos, which is about 4 to 5 hours. Then there is a pre-coding period where you start getting proposals and people will ask you, once we open up the problem statements, people who want to put a proposal for your problem statement will start asking questions on the community. So this will go on Discord. And this we're assuming is about 4 to 5 hours spread across 2 weeks. And then you'll have some time that you'll have to review proposals. And if in case you want to interview, you could also interview, but that reviewing proposals for your projects is about 12 to 16 hours. And then on an ongoing basis, which is a July to August period, there would be regular mentoring and guidance that you'd be providing, which we're expecting is between 4 to 6 hours a week based on our previous experience, comes to about 32 to 48 hours across 8 weeks. And then there will be some midpoint and endpoint showcase events for contributors to showcase what they've worked on, which will be about 4 to 6 hours. So overall, this is a sort of a benchmark we've got, which is about 7 to 10 working days spread across 5 months that you'd typically invest in. And what is the value prop for this? So if you move forward and really look, what's the value prop of the investment of the 7 to 10 days? It is that you would get, when this move forward to the next slide. Yeah, you get about 300 to 400 hours of a high caliber contributor. And with this, you have good awareness about your product in the community. I think one of the things that you do want to do is want to have a sustainable community for all the different DPGs. And you all have different DPGs and also have a community that allows adopters to ask questions. There are some DPG adopters also who want to adopt different DPGs in this call as well. So the idea would be that this community also is enabling adopters to ask questions, have talent that is familiar with DPGs, have worked on them to also work for adopters. And this pipeline of talent that's going to be working with you also will serve as this will serve as an apprentice program for them to join your organization as we move forward. And I think one of the important points we want to call out here is that by doing this, you would have the opportunity to also, for your mentors that come from your organization, build a mentoring muscle. So what we would be doing is during this entire process where mentors from your organizations come and guide contributors, we would have some things that we'd also be sharing with mentors so that they also build their muscle on the mentoring side. So these are some of the key aspects I wanted to share from a value prop perspective. But the real point I want to call out is it's about a 7 to 10 investment over a 5 month period that can give you as a DPG builder opportunity to build a community in a sustainable way, and also for adopters to really leverage this community to build use cases that they want to. If you move forward, we looked at last year's construct, and then one of the learning was, if you look at DPG adopters, I think one of the key things is that they themselves may not be able to have all the answers for contributors. So let's say, for example, I as an organization X want to leverage a DPG. I may know that I want to do that because I've heard about it. I've read their documentation. I feel it answers all the use cases that I'm looking for, but I don't have certain answers that the contributors may have. Then for that, what we're trying to do this time is we're going to have channels on the Discord community for different DPGs. And we request you all to, for your DPGs, have super mentors identified. The objective of these super mentors is really that these super mentors will help in understanding how that DPG or the building block can be leveraged. And any use case that somebody's coming up with, super mentor can brainstorm that in the community. And if any questions come up at a macro level for that particular building block, the super mentor can point them to either an individual or to some resources. But the super mentor is really the enabler for the doctor community for your particular DPG. So this is a new construct that we're looking at. And the aim is that in the Discord community, any DPG builder organization that has a super mentor will have a separate channel for your community. So for example, if tomorrow, let's say Digit has a super mentor, then Digit will have a separate channel that will allow anybody in the community to ask questions from for Digit adoption in that particular channel. And then anybody, so led by the super mentor, anybody can answer that question, but typically the super mentor would be the person who would be orchestrating that. So that's one new concept that we've added on the super mentor front. Okay, the next point is that, as you move forward now, nominating your projects is the main thing that we're doing to start with. So nominating your projects is a fairly simple few steps process. The objective here is that you can identify projects that you all are working on, the DPG that you're working on. Once you've identified that, you can create tickets for those projects in your own GitHub, and for those you identify a potential mentor who's working on that problem statement and submit that problem statement. There is a form link that you all may have received. In fact, we'll share it here also on the chat and as a follow-up on the email as well. But you can submit your problem statement there. And then once that's done, then if there is any doubts, we can clarify that with you. If you feel, we'll just go through all the problem statement in case there is anything we feel that can be added to improve the readability and understanding of that from a contributor perspective. We'd support in doing that. But it's just a few simple steps. We'll also now after this give an example of the type of projects that you can pick up, that you can share here. And one more thing to note here is that this coding period, as you would have seen, is July, August. That's when the coding happens. So in a way, it's good because you can look at your roadmaps for your different DPGs and see some things are either experiments, or if some things are some integrations you want to do, or some new use case you want to try out. You can actually set that up today and get going with those through this community. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to give this over now to Karan, who can go through what are some of the checklists for creating a product, creating a problem statements, and also go through a few examples of the same.
Thanks, Supreet. Hey folks, this is Karan here. Just giving you a recap. I'm one of the engineering managers at Samagra. I'll walk you through the various the checklist that you should be keeping in mind while you are nominating problem statements or projects that the Code for GovTech contributors would be contributing to, and your mentors would be mentoring on. Following this, we would also go through some examples of problem statements. The first thing that we would want you to consider is the problem statement should be able to complete it in 300 to 400 hours with 4 to 6 hours of weekly mentoring. This basically involves your own mentors working with the contributors. We are also okay if the problem statement is complex enough to have 2 contributors working in parallel. Sometimes we do want people to pair up on problem statements and be soundboards for one another. one more thing that is very important, which is the second point, is a comprehensive documentation about the product. If you have it online on GitHub or on GitLab, an introductory README is very helpful to understand the entire context of the project itself, how it works in the grand scheme of things, before people go into your issues to look at what exactly needs to be implemented. The third thing that we would request you all to focus on is focusing on impact, as all of us are driven by projects which are bringing a lot of impact. Describing the issues via stories and what the implementation of that issue can bring out in the larger scheme of things is what we would ask you all to focus on. Ensure that each project has been categorized as per the guidelines. So we have 4 types of projects that you can nominate. We have examples in the next slide. We'll go through that next. And the detailed issue tickets and good first issues for each project allow you to not only create a buzz with good first issues in the project, but also allows your contributors to know in detail what is to be done, what is the acceptance criteria, what is the knowledge that they need to have even before they commit to a problem statement. Going to the next slide, which is the 4 different types of projects that we are looking forward to. The first one is integration related projects. For example, you already have a DPG built out. You just want to integrate one DPG with another, or integrate one system with another. Those would fall under integration problem statements. For example, for Shiksha last year, UCI had to be integrated with Shiksha to allow users to send and receive notifications. This was an example of an integration problem statement. Then there are new simple use cases, which is mentioned below the simple integration problem type. For new simple integration, it means a DPG is already built out. We just want to add one additional simple functionality to it, which would help in bringing more impact to the use case. So for example, last year we built a distributed competency tracking LMS based on digital signatures. So this was kind of like a digital vault of your credentials received from educational institutes. So that would be a simple use case. The third type is, which is mentioned on the top, is core functionality, where there is a DPG where instead of building a very simple additional functionality, you want to add something to the core backbone of the project itself. An example of that was for QUML, a core functionality that will allow randomization of questions and enable multiple selections in an MCQ was done. This was also used extensively, as Rahul mentioned, in the platform used by crores of users. The fourth type is a new complex use case, where an additional DPG already exists. What you would want to do is just add a new functionality on top of it. This is where an example of this is the UCI admin panel. The UCI admin panel already exists. What we are trying to do is we are trying to build a dashboard to show the telemetry of the notifications received by the users. So that's a complex use case. Next slide, please. Now, this is an example of a GitHub ticket that we can go through, which will tell you what is the contributor going to see firsthand when they want to see if this is an issue which I can contribute to or I can nominate myself to work on. I would request us to open the first issue, which is create telemetry dashboard. So this is a template of a issue that we've created. What it contains is first the project details, which talks about what does UCI or what does UCI admin panel or what does UCI inbound, for which you are trying to contribute this solution to, does in the grand scheme of things. This is where we also focus on the impact that this feature is going to bring in this product. The next thing we talk about is the feature to be implemented, a brief summary of what exactly is to be done. Then we talk about what already exists in the system. Next, what is to be built in the system? Learning path talks about the skills required, complexity, and the project size. The product setup is a link that we've added here because we have a very well documented README, which tells you how to set up UCI locally. For other projects, this might be a list of steps that you might have to do. And acceptance criteria is what the mentor and the contributor are going to check in every week, where they understand the acceptance criteria of what is to be delivered at the end. We also mention out of scope so that contributors don't get confused. And at the end, we also talk about milestones, which would be helping in checking between the mentors and the contributors. Then we have a one line about Code for GovTech and how people can get involved in the entire program. So this is a brief of the types of projects, the issues, and the format of issues which would help contributors understand more and get involved very quickly into the program. In the next slide, we are now opening up for question and answer. I will pass the baton back to Sukhpreet. Sukhpreet, over to you.
All right, thanks, Karan. Thanks for the overview. So, okay, so hope this provides a brief overview to all of you about what the C4GT program is all about and how this entire, now the move from just a dedicated mentoring to more a dedicated mentoring and building a sustainable community, initiative looks like. And the details of how to get started is what we wanted to share, like a brief overview of how to get started. I'm going to now open the floor for any questions. I'm hoping that all of you have now gone through this. Also, on the email that was sent, we sent the same sort of deck earlier. If there's any questions with regard to project creation or what more about super mentors or anything, would be helpful for the next 15 minutes to go through any of these across anybody. So please just raise a hand and we'll start answering questions. And if anybody wants to please post in the chat, please do that as well. Idea is that we spend the next few minutes to really clarify any doubts that you may have as you onboard onto this program. In fact, Venkatesh, you can stop sharing. Yes, Shobit from Vani. Yes, please go ahead with the question.
Yeah. Hi. So I was just seeing the form which you have shared. So the DPGs which are being asked here could be systems which need to be built, and it could also be systems which have been built. They are in a POC stage, or some existing solutions which need to be either upgraded and looked at from a DPG lens, right? Because we keep building a lot of solutions which are initially at a project level. They have been used and now they are just not being used for any further use. But we see that there is a larger ecosystem level use case available, right? So these type of problem statements are also addressable, right? Second was that based on the last cohort of the developers which you had, what were the skill sets in terms of tech stacks they could work on, or that is not very predictable at this stage?
Yeah, so I can answer the first question and then hand it over to Shruti Chakshu. So on the first question, you can put forward the projects that you're looking at. The only thing that you want to keep in mind is that if it's something which is in a POC stage or something which you feel is not currently deployed anywhere, that's fine. Main thing is just ensure the impact of that is clearly laid out so that people who are looking at the different problem statements are interested enough to sort of apply to your problem statements. So I think that's one lens to look at. From a tech stack perspective, I'll request Shruti and Chakshu to take that answer based on last year's cohort.
Yeah, so hi, Shobit. So there is not any deterministic tech stack which we have discussed over the project. It depends totally on the project. So there were the projects which are in Angular also. There were the projects in React also. There were the Java project also. There's the ML project also. So the students with the various tech stack came and basis on their interest, basis on their competency, they applied to that project by writing the proposal.
Thank you.
Another thing that we also want to do, right, part of this nudging them as mentors is to make them confident that, stacks don't matter. The problem solving aspect is far greater than figuring out, some syntax or the other. So we've seen the applicants very smart, very, very smart kids around. They're always smarter than us, the next generation. And so whether it's kids or, of course, if there's seasoned folks coming in from industry, you may actually get out help in terms of architecture and so on. But I would say largely there would be folks who would be learners. And so you can expect, of course, basic stuff like JavaScript, Python, and so on. If you're using certain specific libraries, like last year, even we created a MLOps project and really good contributions from everyone. So don't limit it to any specific thing. Don't tailor it to anything. I would say the more eccentric it is, the more latest it is, it's fine, because kids need to know that they need to start ramping up on anything. They need to be more polyglots and problem solvers rather than I am an 8-year-old Android engineer. That is dead now.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks, Shobit.
This is Vijayashree here. I had a question. There were two parts to it, right? The first one was we do that within the stipulated time period. The new one that you're introducing is for a continued one. Now, I wanted to understand how that works. Would we be able to identify as, projects for those, so we have it for a longer period? Would that work as is that the imagination for the continued year-long engagements which we're looking at?
So it's make sure that there is a good chunk that is called out, scoped out for that 2-month period of the dedicated mentoring program. Any commitment beyond that is really up to that person, and it's completely optional. And so even if they actually don't find time to do it beyond that, even if they have contributed to this one, that should be self-sufficient and actually impactful. So just design it that way. That said, we've seen pretty much everyone, continue contributing to that. And so if you build that rapport with them, that bonding with them, and show them the magic of what they've done in the 2 months, I'm sure they'll continue contributing through the community program. The other part of it, the overall community program also is, the idea is to introduce learning camps, boot camps periodically, such that more folks can ramp up on the things that are needed to actually contribute to your DPG. So I know there's sometimes a ramp up time, right, required to actually contribute to it. So the best piece is to isolate things, to say, let's just focus on one part of it. You're just focusing on the authentication element of it, because DPGs are too large. We can't teach them everything in that small time. So you say authentication only, or maybe we're just going to do integration tests for like 5 pieces, or we're going to do load tests for certain things. Like these are okay, tasks to give, which are independent. Then there are certain things that require you to understand how the systems works, especially when it's a coordination or boundaries. It's crossing boundaries between DPGs. It's crisscrossing different libraries, different algorithms being used, and so on. In that case, a lot more ramp up is required, but do plan for that. So don't think that the folks that you're going to actually mentor in the 2-month program are the only ones who are going to do it. Ensure that whatever you're creating after that are also applicable to others, and have those constructs in between. And we'll chat more about it as we come, but I think those learning blocks are important, learning boot camps in between. And secondly, I would say, and this is for everyone, good first issues, presence of good first issues tagged by what kind of expertise required to do it. That's always invaluable, and we all lack in that. And so we don't have good first issues as many. We don't have good documentation often in many of the DPGs, and that's just racing against deadlines, right? But that doesn't mean that needs to not be there. It absolutely needs to be there. So I think we'll all continue evolving that, and hopefully you can do that part of both the programs.
Sure. And one of the things that we'll do right now is also share the Discord community link. Would be great if you all can join. You'll also see that, some of what Rahul was saying, there've been some good first issues posted there, and there's a lot of people jumping onto them and really like getting after, asking good questions around them. So would request you all to join, and please feel free to post certain good first issues from your repos, because that's a good way to get people to be familiar with your products as you finalize the product statement. Okay, we've got a question from Nishant. Nishant again from Pratham. A step in the right direction. Thank you, Nishant. If the expectation of the mentors are laid out in more detail, it will help the org identify mentors beyond those involved directly with technology, open up the possibility of adding in projects without getting anxious about technology capacity. Very good question, Nishant. So I think one of the things that we do want to call out is, so what you had seen, Venkatesh, you can just pull up that slide once. The one about what the mentors are expected to do. So at a very high level, Nishant, what we were discussing is that there are different things that the mentors are expected to do over a period of April all the way till August. And each of those months, there are three different things. One is of setting up the problem statement. That's the first part. Second big cohort is the pre-coding period, where you get questions on your proposal, then you're finalizing the proposals, finalizing contributors after reviewing the proposals. And the last period is the coding period, where you're actually spending that time to mentor and guide individuals. So there is a time commitment overall that is mentioned here. And then there is also a process. So to do each of these, there is also a way to do it. So for example, if Shruti, I can share, Shruti, if you can just share your screen and maybe just give a brief overview of at least one of the steps that will provide a perspective of what is the kind of things that the mentor does, one in action with the contributors. Over to you, Shruti.
Venkatesh, can you just stop sharing your screen so I can just present it? Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the basic overview. This is the project competency passbook. The description and the context has been also set up by the Karan. So this is the student engagement comprehensive learning record platform, which we wanted to explore last year as a project, where Ansh is the contributor. So this is how we set up the RFC, where the weekly milestones, weekly updates, what each week should look like, what things a contributor should have to do in the collaboration with the mentor and mentee. They have decided the milestones. Then the mentor and mentee raise the issues and the pull request basis on these milestones. If I just go to the competency passbook GitHub. Yeah, so this is the sample pull request. So these are the pull requests which has been raised the last year. All the pull requests with the different tasks being done. If I open the sample pull request, then there's the different task which has been accomplished in a pull request, which is also been reviewed by a mentor, the code review. And this is how the pull request has been merged to the actual code base. So this is how the cycle look like, where the contributor and mentor collaboratively discuss the milestones and how the pull request and the issues is being created and the code is actually being merged to the main branch.
So Nishant, hope this answers your question, but I think one of the key things that we've learned is that the more clarity you have upfront that the mentor spends with the contributors to just plan out what the weeks will look like and just set the expectation clear, the more smoother the process is as you start moving forward. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Sukhpreet. Yeah.
So I have one question, Sukhpreet, in the same relation. More than a question, more like a suggestion. So I think we'll have a lot of first-time mentors also coming this year as we are scaling this up in a massive way. I think some sessions from past mentors of either C4GT or programs like GSOC focused on helping the mentor better might just be useful.
Great idea.
Yes. So we had planned certain sessions part before the bootcamp begins of the contributors for the mentors themselves. So we are in the process of just finalizing the sessions in that, but there is a cut of what we want to do based on last year's experience. So yes, no, absolutely agree. And I think that's important because I think this year what we're also saying is that, have people in your organization who are AC2s, 3s to start becoming mentors. So the idea would be that we also build in something for them. And we'll also see on an ongoing basis what's the feedback like both ways and see if something else needs to be factored in during the process. So yes, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks.
Sorry.
Also for DPG builders, while we're waiting on the next question, for DPG builders, I've come across a whole bunch of videos like, for example, there's a YouTube channel called Codex Script, There are videos posted there that actually say there's a guide posted on how to start contributing to Red Hat, or there's a guide posted of how do I contribute to something. And so this is very useful to folks who participate in say Hacktoberfest and others, where they want to participate in open source but don't even know how to start. And so this gives you a good idea about, okay, how do I, what is the, how do I get started with Giphy? How do I get started with Red Hat? How do I, get applying to a Linux Foundation Fellowship and so on? I think DPGs that have been built in India, I don't see those kind of things that we need to all create ourselves also. So any constructs that may be helpful for even mentors to start ramping up on, that would be helpful. And like Supreet mentioned, the construct of a super mentor. So super mentor who's really familiar with certain DPGs. So you may be an organization who's adopting it. Like for example, I think who was it? I think Nishant from Pratham, right? You had asked Nishant, you're struggling to figure out what really does it mean to be a mentor. And as an adopter organization, right, as Pratham, you'd probably be using certain DPGs in your work. You may be an expert on what you do, and you would be an expert in even coding, right? You would have a mentor to do that. But you may have a doubt about, how do I integrate with Diksha APIs? How do I actually add my competency matrix to a Sunbird knowledge such that it's nationally available? Now, those are things that a super mentor can help with. So that's the construct that you're trying to get this time, which is also a super mentor, especially to help DPG adopters kind of ramp up on things. And of course, you would have your own mentor to ensure your domain context and of course, coding context.
Another point I just wanted to call out, I think one of the discussions I was having with a few, I think one of the questions was where do these contributors come from? So what we've got is that we've reached out to over 100 colleges. So a lot of the people who you already see in the Discord community, we've got over 1,600 now. All of them have come from different colleges. So we've reached out to about 100 colleges. In fact, if there are any colleges that you are directly working with, I know I was speaking to Parth and I know Tekri is also in touch with certain colleges. So please feel free to share update regarding this. But we've looked at different colleges, engineering colleges across the country, and we reached out to slightly over 100 for this program. And we expect more students to join in. So that outreach is currently going on. And we'll also see if we can identify certain working professionals on an ongoing basis to also be part of this community. So that's another piece that we are focusing on as we build this community. Okay, we have a minute or two more.
Supreet, there's another question on chat.
Okay, so Parth, essentially what we're doing is we are getting in touch directly with the colleges. But yeah, I mean, there is some content that we are sharing with them. Happy to share that with you as well.
And I guess when you join the Discord channel, I guess we'll create a group for builders, right? Especially a channel for builders, and let us all contribute suggestions, because we're all creating this together, right? We're all going to evolve this together. So all of these are fantastic suggestions, and anything created part of this by anyone really is open. It's all in open source. It's always available on GitHub. The only challenge is, where is it, right? Where is that link? And so we can all help each other, try and figure out the links. We'll figure out where to make it visible, way to provide it, way to create constructs that people can actually consume them, and so on. So please, these are very exciting questions and suggestions, especially. So please keep those coming. We'll continue the conversation on the Discord group.
Great, so that's a good suggestion. Now we'll add a channel just for DPG Builder. I think that would be a good place to get suggestions on an ongoing basis. So great, thank you all for joining. So we are at the end of the the session, but just wanted to call out that the aim was to help everybody understand what are the different aspects of C4GT and how you can contribute projects and be part of this. Just want to reiterate that the first set of projects, the submission, you all would have got a Google form. If Venkatesh, you can also share it here in the community, in this chat. But the aim is that by 30th April, you are also able to submit your project. So hope any questions around, what a project can be, or what's the expectation from the mentors, hope this session clarifies. The same, we'll also share a video in case you want to share this with any of your colleagues who are also working on different problem statements that can be part of C4GT. You can, through that form, submit your projects by April 30th, and between the 1st and 10th, we'll get back to you in case there are any queries or any additions that you can do to that problem statement, and then we'll open it up for proposals from the community. So I look forward to everybody's participation and really excited, to be part of the C4GT initiative, because this is a problem statement I think we've all, heard from so many, or we've all discussed so many times as well, and also tried to see how we can solve this. So hopefully, this attempt really gets us to a place where we have a sustainable community for C4GT. Rahul, any other points you want to add before we close?
No, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and love the participation. And we'll all make our own individual projects better. We'll make the community better. We'll make digital public goods better, and hopefully not just used within India but also outside India. The whole world is looking up to India to figure out what does it mean to actually do these population scale projects. What does it mean to actually get these constructs helping the population in development sector? So I think this group is really going to play a key role there. So thank you so much for contributing and being part of this.
Okay. Thank you all.
Sorry, thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.